Good day everyone. Today I will be presenting my project for the course ECE20L Simulation of an FET amplifier. In this circuit, I have already drawn a circuit called common source amplifier circuit. If you can notice, this circuit is very similar to another circuit called common emitter circuit, which the main difference is that in a common emitter circuit, a transistor called bipolar junction transistor is used instead of a metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor or MOSFET. What is a MOSFET anyway? A MOSFET is a semiconductor device that is widely used for switching purposes and for the amplification of electronic signals in electronic devices. Next is that, what is a common source amplifier? In electronic circuits, amplifiers are used to increase the strength or amplitude of the input signal without any phase change and frequency. Amplifier circuits are made of either FETs or normal BJTs, which I have mentioned earlier. So instead of using a BJT, here we used a MOSFET. Next, before we simulate the circuit, we can use the command .op. Here, right click, and it will show the different values for components such as the current and voltage, so that when we want to compute for the current, for the frequency, amplification factor, or power by hand, we can use these values as reference. Next is we want to simulate the circuit using the command .transient 010M 010M 0. Right click to run. To plot the graph, we can either add traces using this, or we can use the probe command to directly probe the component that we want to plot, such as the Vout. So you can see it is already plotted. If we want to find a more accurate view of the Vout, we can separate the two. Add another plot plane and drag Vout. As you can see, instead of a straight line, we can see a sine wave similar to our input. Next, we want to find the input frequency and output frequency of the circuit. So to find the input frequency, we use the command .measure T1 find time when Vin is equal to 1M. This number can vary depending on what number you choose from the graph. It can be either 8, 6, 4, 2, or anywhere in between the peak-to-peak values. Next, Control M, new line, measure T2 find time when Vin is equal to 1M cross 3. Control M for new line, measure frequency input parameter 1 over T2 minus T1. Right click to simulate, view, error log. We can see that the frequency input is 999.897. For the output, we can use the same commands, measure TA instead of T1 because T1 is already used. Find time when Vout is equal to, just like last time, find a value in between these values. You can use 200p. Control M, new line, TB, find time when Vout is equal to 200p cross 3. Measure Fout parameter 1 over T2 minus T1. Simulate Right click to run, view, error spice log. We can see that the input and output voltages are the input and output frequencies are the same. Because as mentioned earlier, in amplifier circuit, its main goal is to amplify the signal received, not to change the not to change the frequency of the circuit. Next is we want the amplification factor of the voltage. The amplification factor is what we call the um, the amount of times that uh, the input signal has been amplified. For the voltage, we want to use the command uh, that measure transient voltage output peak to peak v v v v out that measure transient voltage input peak to peak v v v in control m that measure voltage gain. We use the um, variables AV for voltage gain, parameter voltage output peak to peak over voltage input peak to peak. Right click to run, view, spice error log. We can see that the voltage gain is equal to 9.24 raised to the power of -8. Next is the amplification factor for the current. Almost using the same commands, we type that measure transient. Instead of VOPP, we're going to current output current peak to peak, current of for the output we're going to use resistor 5, control M that measure transient current input peak to peak current C1, control M that measure for the current gain. You will use AI parameter current in output peak to peak over current input peak to peak. Alright, to run again, view, spice error log. You can see that the current gain is equal to 1.18 raised to the power of -7. Lastly, to find power, we are going to use a simple command that measure AP for power, parameter AV times AI. We have the voltage gain times current gain. Alright, click to run, view, spice error log. So you can see the output voltage is equal to 1.0, the power voltage is equal to 1.09 raised to the power of -14. Here is the input voltage, input frequency, output frequency, voltage output peak to peak, voltage input peak to peak, the voltage gain, current output peak to peak, current input peak to peak, and lastly the current gain. That is all for this short presentation of my project. That is thank you and have a nice day.